I had done documentaries prior, and 10 years ago, while I was releasing a documentary that I did, Francisco Brennand, I met a friend for lunch. Her name is Fafá de Belém. She's a very famous Brazilian musician and artist, singer, and she's from Pará. She's an activist. She's a very amazing woman. And during that encounter, she told me about the cases of sexual exploitation with children in the barges that cross the Tajapuru River. And also that in Pará, in that region, is very common the abuse inside their homes. And I was really, really touched and moved by that reality. I had never heard that something like that, not abuse, but the sexual exploitation occurred. And it really just drove me to do a documentary. And early on the very early stages of the research project, I understood that it was absolutely not possible to go forward with the idea of doing a documentary and having those kids and women and who had gone through so much violence recount me those traumatic experiences, let alone put their faces on camera. So that's how the fiction film came about, very naturally. And I thought that through fiction, and I could build a story that was both delicate and deep, and also able to bring the spectator close to the main character's skin. The documentary aspect, the feeling that what you are watching, it's not a fiction, but it's life itself. It was very important for me because I thought that way you would connect. For me, it was important that the spectator would believe in every second of what they saw on screen, either the landscape, the scenario, the actors, what was happening. So the documentary aspect, I think it's very, very deep because it goes from the researches and the fact that all the stories and the characters are constructed from real life stories that I researched, psychological reactions also that we brought into the script. And the use of the camera following the characters, and also the way that I prepare the actors and research them, so that almost like a theater, so that they would be ready and leaving the scene, and we would follow them organically. But at the same time, you have like a very not rigid, but cinematic languages, and with the ellipses and the work of sound. So it's really a mixture of a naturalistic approach and way of seeing, but with a very rigorous cinematic style, I think. I think it would be unbearable, right? I mean, who could watch such thing? I think it would be another form of violence, another form of exploitation of that woman, of the child that was, portraying the character. And I think being a woman and talking about our issues, it gave me the power to tell a story with respect, ethics, delicacy, and it was never a question to show violence. There was never in the script a scene where you actually saw the abuse. This is something that we cannot bear live, let alone see. And it was very important for me that for the film to have its power of transformation, and I needed the spectator to be able to watch the story, to empathize with the character. So it was, to me, the real point was for you to feel what she was feeling and going through the very little but very deep steps of what the violence is doing in this girl's body, in this girl's mind, in this girl's psychological being. And I think the use of ellipses and the use of a very psychological, even though the sound is very naturalistic, you feel as if you were there in the water, in the forest. But then as she begins to suffer those violences, the sound starts to get even more psychological, so you can feel with her. And I used it, and the camera as well, really close to her, sort of claustrophobic, even though you have the contrast of being in, large amounts of water, this beautiful forest that actually, sort of suffocates you. I really do hope I made this film for that. I hope MANAS will help shed light on this so difficult, right? Abuse is surrounded by silence. This is a film about violence, silence, but also courage. So I really hope that the spectator comes out of the theater with empathy for someone who is going through, a woman or a child who is going through violence. And I don't think that you must have had any situation of abuse to fight against it. It's really unacceptable that we as women, we cannot go out on the streets without being safe, or we cannot feel safe at our own homes because men think they have the rights to do whatever they want with us. And I think that happens because they keep unpunished. Nothing happens. And also it's very hard to talk about it. So I hope this film will help break the silence, will leave you at the end transformed and willing to, to speak out if you are a victim of violence, or if you are not, to help someone who is. And Jamile was, such a great discovery. We found her in Belém. It was really important to me that the protagonist was from the region. And we did a process of casting for about a little more than 6 months. And she came to us really at the end of the process, but already very centered and focused. And with that, what you see on the screen, she was very mature. And once we started doing the researches with her and a few other girls that were pre-selected, she really stood out. And once we started shooting, she had this, she has this amazing cinematic quality. She's really rare. She's able to, the silence, and she has such a intelligent, emotional intelligence, and also she was able to understand very quickly as the shooting went on, the aspects of the filming and of the cinematic process. And it was a delight to direct her, as it was my first actor's direction as well. So we were, really starting together. And she's amazing. I'm very proud. She's very brave. And Fatima Macedo, the actress who plays the mom, I think is one of the hardest characters in the film. So difficult, so many layers and complexities. A woman is always judged no matter what. And I think the film takes you into a ride where you get to understand what happened in that woman's life, and how she came to be and how she came to be silenced. And Fatima, she's a professional actress from Brazil, from the northeast of Brazil, and she was really, really brave and open in the process. And I'm really in awe of her performance.